I think these students are always going to remember this year because I know I am, because they really made an impact. Every class has made an impact in my life, but this one more so.
Welcome to Love as a Classroom Stories of Inclusion, a podcast about creating high quality, meaningful, inclusive experiences for children with and without disabilities. In each series, I share the stories of teams that come together through love to create high quality, meaningful, inclusive experiences for children and families. Episode 1 of this series, we met Brooke Walker. She introduced us to her daughter, Navee, who's deaf. She talked about the importance of inclusion for Navee and voiced a concern for the future. In episode 2, Miss Onofre, her kindergarten teacher, shared the indelible impact Navee had on her and her classroom community. She talked about what she did to create an inclusive kindergarten classroom. If you haven't listened to those episodes, I encourage you to go back and listen before you listen to this one. Please subscribe so you don't miss episode number 4 with Wendy Bowman and episode 5 with Navee Walker. In this episode, episode 3, we'll be talking with
Christy Anderson. I've been teaching for 28 years. My degree is in education of the deaf. I used to be a teacher of the deaf. We moved away to Germany, and then I started teaching in the regular ed classroom. I'm not stateside, and I just stayed in the general ed classroom.
Ms. Anderson will express what inclusion looks like and feels like in a first grade classroom. Her stories reveal the impact of Navee's time as a learner in Miss Onofre's community. In Miss Anderson's class, Navee became a bridge for an expectation we all should have. Classrooms where inclusion creates a high-quality learning experience for every child and adult in the classroom. Let's get started.
Navee's great aunt is a coworker of mine. And she said, "Oh, Navee is coming to our school. Would you be willing to teach her in after school?" I said, "I will, but what grade is she going in?" And she said, "First grade." Well, I'm a first grade teacher. I said, "Let her be in my classroom because I can sign with her." And that was like the day before we had open house. The next night was open house and she was in my classroom. Throughout the day, I was signing and Wendy signed at the same time. Wendy gave every child a sign name, and the kids were just so excited. They learned each other's sign names. They knew if we're having a discussion and they called on somebody, they wanted somebody to speak, they had to sign their name so that Navee would know who to look at and who they're talking about. Every week we would try it and teach them a little bit more. And like I said, I was signing and Wendy was signing too. So they're going to pick up sign language. And we had a few, it was just so natural to them. They picked up how to sign and would just sign to Navee all day. It flowed so well. I did not have any students say, "No, I don't want to do that. No, that's weird." I remember one time that we had people coming in to observe, and everybody, the whole class, everybody was signing. And I heard somebody ask one of the principal, "Okay, somebody's deaf in here, but who?" And I love that they could not pick out who the deaf kid was. That was just like a wonderful moment for me because that's how it should be. Everybody was including her in every conversation, and you could not look and see, "Oh, right there, that's the deaf kid." They had to ask before they knew it was deaf. She could come in the mornings and she'd say, "Oh, they're absent today. They're not here." She would always come tell me who was here and who was not here and who was still in the lunchroom. That was like her little job because it helped her learn everybody's name. And a lot of times kids her age that are deaf don't associate their name. They're just like a boy or a girl. That's all they would call them. But she knew to call them their name. And that's big for someone coming from no language. I had two students. One was a nonverbal student, call him Bobby. Bobby, he would not talk. It took him a long time to speak to me, to even read to me. But I saw him in a group with her. And I would notice he'd kind of cut his eyes over there and watch her. And then she would take his hands and help him do the signs and stuff. And before you know it, he was signing also. And then he started talking more too. And he would talk more to the others that meant the world to me because he had not done that in a previous class. And I know it's because of Navi and because of her being in there. He could say, huh, she doesn't talk either. I don't talk either. Another student, we'll call him Alan. Alan was on the spectrum, and we get very excited whenever the kids would sign his name. He'd learn his name in sign language. And we'd leave the reading carpet, and I always tell him back to tiptoe. And he'd leave the carpet. He said, tiptoe, tiptoe. And he would learn little things like that. And the first time he did it, Nobby was just so proud of him. And she would call his name, and she celebrated him that he had learned that. And then Wendy walked back in the room, and she had to tell Miss Wendy what he had done. And it was just huge that she saw that he had not been participating, and then he knew to sign tiptoe. Just something so simple. But celebrated with him. And whenever Bobby started signing more, she really celebrated. Every morning, we would sign the Pledge of Allegiance and what we called the Lion Creed. And everybody signed it. When Navi first noticed them signing it, she was just so excited. They're doing it, they're signing it. And she wouldn't always be so, but all the hearing kids were. And a lot of times she didn't do it because she was watching everybody else. But she loved that they were in with her language. I think having her in there and signing with her, I think it really helped them. Alan, whenever he would go and eat breakfast in the mornings, he always sat with him. And she would bring him back to the room because he had previously needed an aide to do that. That became her job. And she just took it upon herself to start doing it, and we let her.
In the last episode, Miss Onifray talked about how children's identities and sense of belonging and purpose increased when they were able to support and learn with Navi. I'm wondering if that's why maybe she was so adept at helping other children in first grade. Why do you think she was so inclined and interested in helping the children in your classroom?
I think she just really recognized it because they did not talk as much. They were not as involved in like our class discussions and the things we were doing as everybody else. And so I think she recognized that. And especially when we had small group time, which is about 4 to 5 of us at a table, she would just get in there. At the end of the year, a non-English speaker come in, and she took him under her wing too. And I don't know how she couldn't understand. And I'm like, wow. He was Spanish speaking. And she just has something about her that kind of demands, hey, I'm here, pay attention to me. And the kids did. She knew how to get stuff out of them.
Brooke talked about her concerns regarding the teacher of the deaf and the amount of time Navi was going to get of special education. There's no doubt she was doing well socially and communicating expressively. What were some of the struggles or concerns you had, especially regarding literacy?
One of my big struggles was the state testing that I had to do with her. Not fair because it was geared for hearing kids. And it was phonetic, reading based stuff. She's not hearing the phonemes and how to blend the words. And so it said that she could not do it. And I did not like giving that test, but I had to give it. And I just think that was very unfair. That was just one of those things that every time I did it, I was like, why? And I know that I have to show something. But when you know that something is not going to show any growth, and it's not showing any growth because what she can't hear, it's just not fair. To me, that was a huge frustration of mine because she was better than the test. And I knew it. We all knew it. I hope eventually there will be some kind of change, and Brooke and Chase are the type of parents that will make the change. And I'm very glad about it.
With your background in deaf ed, I'm sure you thought about these concerns over and over, and I'm guessing you probably talked with Wendy about it just because of her background. Do you have any ideas for a solution?
When I was a teacher of the deaf, and this was 25 years ago, I was in a different state. There were 2 other teachers of the deaf. We went to our director and said, this isn't fair to our deaf kids. Why don't we do something that is actually beneficial to them on different kind of testing? We went to the deaf school in that state to see what the deaf school uses that would be comparable, because the deaf school still has to do some kind of testing, and it was approved through that district. I don't understand why something like that can't happen. I don't see why we could not do what they do for the deaf kids. What would make sense to me. And I know there is so much behind the scenes that I have no idea about. But that's just, in my mind, that can't happen.
Right? And it's not just phonetics tests for a deaf child. There are so many research-based tools and strategies for children with disabilities that seem to be restricted to self-contained or therapeutic settings. But with Navee, she didn't need those additional supports until now, because you, Miss Onofre, and Wendy had the skills and knowledge to support Navee and her classmates in the community. I think that Navee does not need to be the exception. I think she should be the expectations. But what do we do to create inclusive experiences for every child in a way that Navee was included? Can you help back me up in saying that it is possible for every child to be included in general education programs? If we could clone you, Miss Onofre, and Wendy, that would be awesome, but we can't.
I think it can be possible. Years ago, when I was a teacher of the deaf, I went to a conference and they were talking about a public school, and everybody signed. The general ed teacher signed, all of the kids signed, the deaf kids signed it. It wasn't just in that one classroom, it was throughout the whole school. I think it is possible, but it takes a lot of hard work. And it's a lot of hard work that some people just aren't willing to do. And that's a shame, because that's why we're here. That's why we're educators, to put our hard work and our heart and our love into these kids. And if you want to see it successful, that's what you have to do, is to put the work in. I feel that it's very possible that it can happen. But if you don't have the people willing to put forth the effort and do the things that needs to do, and see where every child can't fit into this mold. We can't do this. Every child can't do this. So let's make it to where every child can. That's where we need to be, because every child can be successful, but every child is not going to be a doctor or a lawyer, but they can still be successful. Because we don't need millions of doctors. We don't need millions of lawyers. We need mechanics. We need farmers. We need all these different things. And everybody can be successful. Every child can be successful.
It sounds similar to what I aimed for later in my career in the classroom, and that is teaching to the margins. You look at the children who are in the margins, and if we can reach those children and we can teach those children and those children are engaged, everyone else fits in. And it's just like what you're talking about with Bobby and with Alan. Navee is the furthest in the margins because she has no hearing. Alan and Bobby, they do have hearing, but they have other concerns and needs. Teaching to the margin, teaching the children sign language, everybody else was able to adapt and fill in the middle. Would you agree with that?
Yes. Well, I agree.
It makes me think about what Miss Onofre said. What we need to do is use all the skills and knowledge and expertise like you as a deaf educator early in your career and Miss Wendy has as an interpreter. Everybody has this different skill set. And we need to use those to integrate and train teachers in general education. We need to use teachers who are really great at working with children who have disabilities and help them be a voice, bring them into the conversation, have them support the classroom so that we don't have to have kids that are pulled out, so that teachers develop more skills, better skills, and there's collaboration. It's a matter of how do we provide these in the classroom so that every child can feel included. I'm wondering if that's really something that would work for children who are deaf or who are blind. And I'm curious what you think about that.
I think it would be great if every classroom could have co-teachers, the gen ed teacher and ESC teacher in every classroom, or at least through the majority, of the day. And instead of what you said, instead of pulling the kids out, our kids who are not needing those special services can still benefit, can still say, oh, okay, I saw Miss Wendy show her how to do this. Miss Anderson did it this way. Oh, I can take both of them, make a connection, figure out how to do something easier. But I'm using both things that they showed us, both experts in the field. In a previous school that I was at, I had a co-teacher. She was an ESC teacher, but we co-taught in the same room all day. It was wonderful because the kids would take what Miss Kay said and what Miss Anderson said. And it just made sense to me because one teacher did not know more than the other. We were all on the same level. Kids saw us at the same level. And I didn't see it as giving up my control of my classroom because it's not my classroom, it's the school's classroom. I'm just in it for that amount of time for that year. And I wanted to be able to do the best that I could. And if that meant having another teacher in there to help lighten the load, it makes for an easier, better year because you have somebody to bounce stuff off of.
Do you think Wendy played that role for you this year?
Oh, yes. She and I worked so well together. I just loved having her in my room.
How did you feel, or what were you thinking when you first found out that Wendy was going to be in your classroom?
I was very intimidated when I first knew she was going to be in there because I had not signed in years in an educational setting. I had signed with my best friends and in church and stuff like that. And that's totally different. And I thought, oh, I'm just not going to be at par. She is going to think I don't know anything. She is so wonderful and put me at ease and helped me get back some of this skill that I have been missing. I still got ways to go. Nobody can beat Miss Wendy. Wendy is just phenomenal. And I did not expect her, hey, you have to do this because you're just the intern. I wasn't like that. She was part of the room. It was her classroom too. It was just such a wonderful thing having her in there because she taught me so much. I loved having somebody else in there to say, what do you think about this? Do you think this was all right? Because I need that feedback. And I knew she would be honest with me and do it in a way that was loving and caring and tell me how I can improve and what I can do better and help explain things when I'm like, I'm at my wit's end. How do I need to explain this better for the kids to understand it? And when we would come up with how to do it, and the kids were like, okay. And they knew that they could go and ask Wendy, just like they could come and ask me. She never said, that's not my job. She never did. She accepted the kids and just being part of our classroom family. I appreciate that.
What advice do you have for teachers who are in inclusive programs? They're scared about inclusion. What advice can you offer them?
My advice that I learned a long time ago, do not listen to the bad things that's being said about the kid coming up about, well, let me just warn you. I try not to do that because every child's different and every teacher is different. You're going to mesh differently than maybe the teacher previously did with this child and the child with you. You have to develop your own rapport with that student. And you have to make your own path with that student. And just because someone had an amazing year with a certain student, yours might be a little wrong. It happens sometimes because personalities are different. And you have to be open to know that every child is different and comes from different backgrounds, different trauma, and some needs a little bit more patience. And sometimes you have to dig deep, but dig deep because it's worth it. Because you don't know what you're missing out if you just be like, oh, that kid's can't. Don't be like that. Dig deep and always find something every day to praise about a student. If it's nothing but your hair looks so pretty today, find something to praise about every student. In my first years of teaching, I would get worked up if a previous teacher came to me and said, oh, you're getting so-and-so, he's a handful. I would worry about it all summer. And now I'm like, when they walk through my door, we'll find our own path. And that's what you have to do because everybody's different. And it's okay. Because it'd be boring if everybody was the same.
It really would. And I think Navee really exemplifies that. What's the biggest lesson you learned in your classroom this past year with Navee? And what are the things you're going to take with you as you move forward in your career?
How hard I get choked up, I'm sorry. How loving and accepting each and every student this year was to each other. And Navee helped bridge that gap. And that's hard to find. They were so helpful to each other. I could have called on any of my students to go help with this one, and they would do it. They didn't care who they were paired with. They loved each other. They helped each other. And I think just having all the different exceptionalities we had this year, I think these students are always going to remember this year. Because I know I am. Because they really made an impact. Every class has made an impact in my life. But this one more so.
And do you think that's directly due to Navee?
It is due to Navee, but it's also due to my Alex and to my potties. All of my kids. We had a student that had to go back to Mexico for a while. Every day Navee asked, where is he? Where is he? When's he coming back? And he came back a few weeks later and the office called and said, do you want him back? And I said, yeah, just a second. I held the phone up. I said, kid, so-and-so's back. Do we want him back in a ring? They all were like, yes, they just loved on each other. And it's been a while since I've had a class that was so loving and accepting of each other. And they were. And I'm always going to remember it. Because that's hard to find. But I was very blessed.
That's so wonderful.
You get me talking about Navee, I could just go on and on. Because she's wonderful. She is amazing, and no amount of words will ever be enough for her. Because she is going to be an amazing woman one day. Because she's an amazing child. And she's going to go far and be such a difference maker in this world. And I'm excited to see it and to say, I had a little part of that. I got to be in Navee's world. Not everybody gets to be in Navee's world, but I got to be in Navee's world for a while.
Thank you so much, Miss Anderson, for sharing your experiences, your love with me and this podcast.
Thank you.
Christy Anderson is a strong believer in the power and promise of inclusion, as strong as I am when the right supports are in place. We share a recognition for the current challenges and see a future where inclusion is a reality for children with and without disabilities. We need to create classrooms and schools where we do not work in isolation, dividing special education and general education. We need to distribute our expertise and work together as a team with a shared mission and vision for schools and classrooms where there is an unconditional sense of belonging and every child has access to the curriculum. Thank you for listening to Love is a Classroom, Stories of Inclusion. Please subscribe to the podcast, post a review, and share our episodes. You can follow us on Love is a Classroom on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. If you're a teacher, parent, or advocate who would like to share your story, please go to loveisaclassroom.com. Click on Contact and share a brief summary of your experience. Until next time, choose love, choose inclusion.